Welcome, everybody. This is the fifth episode of DUCKit, where we hosted Houssam from the United Nations High Commission for Refugees. He told us about his rebel beginnings, and today he is one of the leaders of the UNHCR in the Middle East, leading all private sector partnerships. He told us about the mandate of the United Nations in the region for refugees. He told us about the challenges that he's been dealing with as an organization because of COVID. He told us about amazing opportunities for the future, and he showed us what real optimism is all about. So don't forget to tune in, and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for listening to DUCKit. Welcome, everybody. This is the fifth episode of DUCKit, where we host Houssam, the head of regional partnerships in MENA for the United Nations High Commission for Refugees. Welcome, Houssam.
Hi, how are you?
Very good. Thank you for joining us. And we have a new co-host today, Nadia, first time co-hosting.
Hello.
So before we jump in, I learned a little bit about you. I've known you for over 5 years, Houssam, but I feel like I learned a little bit before the show. You spent a lot of time at Greenpeace, and I'm super interested, to hear more about that. You spent some time at EAD, the Environment Agency in Abu Dhabi, and you spent over 8 years at the United Nations High Commission for Refugees. You seem to be a guy who's a warrior for doing good in the region. I'd love to know why and how come you've had such a long career and a dedicated journey to doing what you do.
Chris, you made me feel old anyway, but let's focus on the positive one. So yes, I spent actually my beginning of my career in Greenpeace, but I was more I started as a volunteer by then, and I have to admit that it wasn't the environment by then that pushed me to do that, to join Greenpeace. It was more the activism, doing something,
the rebel.
Taking action. Yeah, so that's that. But then from taking action in Greenpeace, I moved immediately in Greenpeace for fundraising, and definitely by chance. They just needed some volunteers to help in the face-to-face on the street fundraising. This is where I joined. I did that. It seems I was good, and then I was a coordinator, and then a team leader, and then I stayed for years with Greenpeace in the Mediterranean region by then. So between Turkey, a little bit of North Africa, Egypt, and Lebanon. So that was the fun days. Beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. Super interesting.
Yeah, and then actually I changed kind of direction. Not from. So then I became an environmentalist. I have to say, like this is where
Yes.
you understand what does it mean, and I had a project in Dubai to do for Greenpeace, and I was headhunted by the Environment Agency Abu Dhabi, and I joined for a change. It was more as well as stakeholder engagement, but more the government side of things, making policies and but get people on the same page. And this is what I think I'm good at sometimes, I have to say. So it worked very well for a few years, and then I started, I feel the rush to do something else and to go back in a way to the adrenaline of targets and working for a good cause, but not in the government. Of course, environment and a good cause, just maybe outside the government, let's say.
Sure.
This is where I had the opportunity to join the Refugee Agency or UNHCR. And here we go. I thought I'm going to stay for 4 years maximum. I'm stuck in a good way. Beautiful work and the organization. Very passionate now on the refugee side, I have to say.
And I gotta say, I think that passion has been transferred quite quickly to both Nadia and I. And I think in preparation for this kind of podcast, we reflected a bit on our history, our journey, right? Yes. So I think the first time I met anyone from UNHCR, it was Shadi. I was connected to him in my early days in Karim. And back then, I don't know if you remember, but back then, we were a couple of years into the unfortunate situation of Syria, and a lot of us in the region were trying to figure out how we could, play a bigger role in trying to help, this huge, growing crisis of refugees in the region. And I remember back then, I think it was 2015. That was the first time, 2014 or 2015. It was the first time we kind of connected, and we did something that was actually quite, I'm really proud of. We were able to create an amazing product within Kareem in order to kind of raise awareness and get people to, indirectly also have a positive impact and donate, etc., through the rides. And what's interesting is, a lot of people laugh at my career because I've moved a lot from brand to brand to brand to brand. I can't sit still for more than a couple of years. But throughout that journey, I've somehow tried to always keep my partnership and our relationship kind of alive. And I think we also did something when we were at OSN, when I was at OSN. And what's super interesting is the conclusion of where we are today. And not many listeners or not many people in the audience know the story of DUCKLIFE. Now, I'm not sure if you know the full story of DUCKLIFE, but DUCKLIFE has a whole kind of meaning behind it. It's a funny name, it's a bold name, but the duck for us is a symbol. And that symbol is refugees. And for us, ducks are symbols of refugees because they migrate from place to place and they have freedom of mobility purely. They don't have to have, yeah. So the duck for us is a symbol of refugees. And DUCKLIFE, the reason it's called DUCKLIFE is because Nadia and I grew up in the 90s. We're a 90s kid. And when we were growing up, at least when I was growing up, I was a big fan of Tupac Shakur, who was a very famous rapper. And he used to say something called Thug Life. And of course, we're not thugs and we're not gangsters, but we were inspired by his kind of attitude, his raison de vivre. He was extremely kind of passionate and he always fought for what he believed in. Right. So he was extremely unapologetic. So we wanted to take that kind of DNA and we wanted to apply it to kind of a brand that kind of had the same tone of voice, the same kind of passion, the same kind of presence, but also raise awareness and have a deep-rooted commitment to refugees, hence DUCKLIFE. And in a way, I think my personal journey with the whole refugee crisis was kind of sparked or began, I think, really more formally in my relationship with the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, so you and your team. So it's quite emotional to have this conversation and to be able to get to that stage over 5 years and realize that today Nadia and I are co-founders of an organization that is dedicated to a cause that you guys are the main kind of supporters of, and it's really interesting that we're here today and we're having this conversation. So thank you, first of all, because I think that journey wouldn't have happened without our experiences with you. And I think on that, we'd love to learn a little bit more on what the United Nations High Commission of Refugees is all about, especially in the MENA. And I think our audience would love to understand what your mandate is, how you're seeing the lay of the land, etc. And yeah, please give them an introduction because I think I know a little bit, but it'd be great to learn some more.
No, but let me say one thing first. No, but I mean 2015, and I have to say, I was joking the other day, but in a way I mean it. You're a very good friend because for the passion you're holding, and I think moving from one place to another, I was wishing for you to move more because you take this friendship with you, and I totally appreciate this, and Nadia as well. I think we're in a way this friendship is really about a beautiful thing, which is now I learned the duck is part of it. But thank you for mentioning.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
No, true. Great story, definitely. So I'll tell. So when I started with the UNHCR, actually, I was first based in Abu Dhabi. I didn't go far away. I'm still in Dubai now, but so that's the move I did. But I have to say, I was on a mission from the organization is to create a more solid approach to partner with the private sector. And for UNHCR is where we serve refugees and displaced people all around the world. We're trying as an organization for some time now not to work only with governments.
Yeah.
I'll go here back one step. So UNHCR is obviously is part of the United Nations, but we're a humanitarian arm of the UN, right? So when conflict happens, and then people start, unfortunately, to move, whether within their countries or outside their countries, this is where we come. We have a mandate from the United Nations to take care of those people, right? And we were born after the World War II, where we had to take care of Europeans who had to flee because of the war. And we were supposed to close after a few years, right? And then suddenly another conflict happened, and after that, our mandate is being renewed again and again and again. And since then, this is what's happening, unfortunately. So our story is not a very beautiful story background-wise, because obviously we're there because of conflict. But it seems that without real political solutions of peace around the world, if that's possible, such organizations, us and others, of course, there are beautiful organizations out there who are doing great job for children, for but that's why we exist, and we're all around the world, so we cover many countries, and but most of our staff are on the ground where we work. So not like me sitting in Dubai in a nice neighborhood because of my job, but then most of my colleagues are on the ground, in Bangladesh, in Africa, in the Syria situation, in Iraq, Afghanistan, doing the core business that we do, which is protecting refugees. Protecting refugees, that starts from the simple identity that it's very easy for us here to issue, and present ourselves and have a health insurance in these very bad, unfortunate days, to going to education, to have a career, etc. Refugees, they don't have identity card when they leave in many cases, or some countries need to give them another one, and we work legally to protect them, starting from ground zero identity, and make sure after that they are taken care of through healthcare, shelter, food, education for children, women protection and education, and training for men and women, taking care of the elderly, and then hopefully one day they can go back home, right? Or go to another country if that's possible, if they cannot go back home, or be integrated where the country it is. So going back to my mission was really to create new partnerships with the private sector, and try to find solutions, whether through direct donations or through solution provision, where companies, individuals, and foundations can provide it. So that's in a nutshell what we do as an organization, and what I do with the team here. So stop me when you want to stop.
Well, I'm super interested because it's true. I mean, when you go on the ground, let's say, I mean, I've done a mission with UNHCR. We went to Lebanon, and you see the vast array of skill sets that your team have. You go to one center that has a psychologist, you have a child protection officer, you have a wash, so it's like sanitation officer, and there's like a breadth of expertise that you need. You have teachers, so I mean, the scale of the operations is absolutely massive. I mean, how big is the team, let's say, in kind of areas of displacement or refugee camps, versus how big is your team, let's say, here? And what are the differences in what you do here versus on the ground?
So very good question. So actually, most of our staff, again, are on the ground, but we have a team that is in few countries. So we have one person, for example, from my team in Jordan to facilitate this kind of mission visibility, make sure that donors and partners, they go and see the stories, tell the stories from the field, so people can know Lebanon, Morocco, Egypt, and we have a team as well who's working, and this is mainly my team, who's working on partnerships, making sure that we build long-lasting partnerships that will benefit refugees at the end of the day, benefit the organization through solutions, etc. But our team is So I started alone by that day when I started Abu Dhabi, but now we're a few people in Saudi, in UAE, in the countries I mentioned, in Kuwait and other places in the GCC. We're a bunch of people, and we have as well a small team in Beirut. And that team is really a digital outreach team who's responsible to make sure that we go digitally and reach out to as much as people as possible. And that team in Beirut as well, through the years, we started this in 2012, but through the years we have a very, very good experience. We learned a lot, of course, on doing charitable work online in the region in Arabic, right? And I think it was an amazing journey with the digital part of things. And I can write a book about it humbly, but it's a teamwork. But at the end of the day, so the team is in UNHCR MENA is big because most of them on the ground. We're around 20 people all around MENA, building partnerships and trying to do that. So
So,
and yeah, go ahead.
sorry, I have a question on the partnerships because we've been working basically, our relationship has been a partnership for over 5 years, and I remember when we first started. I guess my question is, has partnerships, at least in the private sector, evolved and changed over time? Because I remember when we first started, it was actually quite challenging in terms of being able to publicly speak about certain circumstances, about certain conflicts, about highlighting specific issues that we had in specific countries. I remember at Karim, we were very careful in terms of which countries were participating in the campaigns, which conflicts we could speak about, which refugees in which countries we could speak about. Has that changed at all over the last 5 years? I feel like it has, but I'm just wondering on your end if it actually has.
No, we definitely, I mean, it was so sensitive to talk about refugees, and it was always related to political conflict, which it is, right? At the end of the day. But I think we came a long way, Chris, because, protracted problems like the refugee issues, you can't hide or shy from it. So what happened is, I think the first few years, as you said, it was difficult, people, oh, refugees, I don't want people to know that, I'm giving to refugees even, or giving to that country, and that's changed because it's there for like the last, so for example, if I'm talking about Syria, it's there now for 9 years. How can you not
ignore it for that long?
Yeah, I mean, it's there, khalas, it's over. And there's a whole political aspect that's changing at the same time. And of course, at the same time, you have a generation of children who, lost 10 years of their lives. So you cannot ignore it. And now, actually, it's more. So when you talk about children, you talk about women, you talk about e-learning, education, all psychosocial support that you, Nadia, mentioned. It's for refugees and for non-refugees, but refugee is always part of the story now. And at the same time, when you talk about COVID-19, which I'm sure we're going to tackle it in a bit, but COVID-19 covers the whole world, including refugees, that there are more than 70 million people. It's bigger than the UK, I think, right? 70 million is bigger than the UK, right? So you're talking about a country of people who are displaced with no home, very risky for their health, because sometimes no insurance, healthcare is not very strong. In many countries they are in, 85% of those refugees are in countries where you don't have a very strong healthcare system. So that's for the hosting community and for them as well. So they are part of the story, we wish it or not.
And it's true. I mean, like, you think about the vulnerability that they have. They're already vulnerable because they're refugees, and then they're additionally vulnerable given COVID. I mean, I don't know what the percentage is that don't have access to running water. I mean, we think that hand washing is the best preventative measure. If there's no soap or access to running water, or access to running water is so far that you have to get out of self-isolation, it becomes a challenge.
True. No, definitely, that's the basics, of course. And then you go to the health system, Nadia, and then what you suffer from, like mentally, is that what you see is that the system, the health system, because you don't have enough money, you need to prioritize. You don't prioritize the cancer, sometimes the cancer situation, because you have children who are very sick now, and you need to take care of them. So the system is I mean, we are doing our best. Our partners on the ground are doing their best, but vulnerability for refugees is very high because not every country is the same. First, most of the refugees are not in camps. It's a myth, actually. Most of the refugees are in urban situations, so they have to pay rent, they have to go to school, and most of the time they have to pay for it. They have insurance, health insurance issues, and they usually they are not allowed to work, and some of them they take cash assistance, but a very small amount that they to just to survive. So it's a problem within a country that they already have a problem. So I'll talk about my country, Lebanon, right? Very economically, we all know it's not a secret, very challenging. We've been through turmoils in the last year. We're at a certain point we were the biggest host of refugees in proportion of the size of the country. But then it's very challenging for the community and for the government, we have to admit, to take care of everyone, including the refugees. So first thing we do as UNHCR is offer help to the government and work with them and make sure refugees are included. And I have to say, Jordan, Lebanon, Iraq, even Iraq with all its problems, Egypt, they were all very generous as a community, as families, as a government. It's not Europe, and the conflict is happening there, and first refugees leave to these countries. So our mandate as well is work with host communities who are mostly non-rich countries to make sure refugees are included and to help the host communities at the same time. And now you have an emergency within the emergency, which is the COVID-19, unfortunately.
Now, Houssam, on the point of COVID, right, and the point of private sector partnerships, I'm interested to know kind of the impact it's had on the commitments that private sector kind of companies might have made pre-COVID. I know us at DUCKLIFE, we have a business model that we're quite committed to, right? So in the terms that we actually believe that if we create any shareholder value, then an equal value needs to be distributed to a cause that we hold dear, and we have a strategic partnership with you guys, and that cause today is refugees. And I got to say, and I have to admit that in these times, it has been actually quite challenging for us, an organization that is so committed to the United Nations High Commission to Refugees. It has actually had an impact on the scale of our commitments, right? So of course, as COVID is impacting all industries and all companies and all revenues and is making things economically tighter for everyone, even us, an organization that is super committed, that has it built into their business model, we have had to reduce, obviously, because everything else has been reduced. So as our revenue kind of gets impacted, as our costs need to be tightened, and as our shareholder value goes down based on the situation, so does our commitment and ability to continue the same, I would say, frequency and size of the commitments have, I know me and Nadia, for example, 2 weeks ago, we had to make our quarterly kind of donation commitment. And we looked at our P&L and we did, proportionally what we could, but it's definitely lower than it was the quarter before. So how is that really impacting you guys? And how does that in turn impact the operations on the ground?
It's very challenging. I mean, and thank you for mentioning that, because, okay, so first of all, I'm an optimist. Otherwise, I wouldn't be a fundraiser, because you have to meet your target anyway.
Sure.
So, and that's the business model we have, and it's a return on investment. We follow a business model that is very close to the business world. Saying that, with the COVID situation, nobody planned for it, right? I'm sure you guys didn't really, you were not super smart and planned for COVID-19, no? And nobody did, right? And So, like everyone, we were surprised, and the first reaction was, okay, how this will gonna affect the refugees, and then you started having this revised budget coming to us, as you know, we try to help in raising this budget, because countries where we have refugees, you need to raise awareness about COVID-19. You have to precautiously do some work, including isolation places in case there is a breakout, so you can put, you know, the infected people in that section. And then you need to do testing, and you need to support the government for the host communities, because you have poverty line as well, which is very, you know, in Yemen and Syria alone, it's around poverty line is between 75 to 90% of under poverty line. It's very challenging. So with all of that, you need to revise your budget to do the extra activities, and you have your lifeline activities, from cash assistance to healthcare to, you know, education, etc., plus education. And so you need to add this to that. So it's so challenging, and it was a shock, and we were trying to deal with it. And the light at the end of the tunnel, I think, it's not enough, but we saw online, and this is the first year before Ramadan, we see people giving more before Ramadan. So usually it goes down, and then it goes up again in Ramadan. When it comes to individual giving, like you guys and I, but then this year it's up, it's going well, and we see people who we thought they would not, you know, they will, even though they are not giving the amounts, but they are giving. I think the commitment is there, as you said, Chris, like yourself. But then the strategy now that we're following is, broaden your friendship in this time. Make sure you build even you broaden your network, you strengthen your network, because good days will come back. And then people gives more even in challenging time, those who can, right, those who can afford it. So what we're trying to do now is not being more aggressive, but go more, being, provide solutions through companies, whether airlines, whether e-learning platforms, whether finding a way for someone to contribute to help in this pandemic situation. And again, I'm very optimistic. And now Ramadan is in the door, and I'll be happy to report back to you guys after Ramadan. Again, I'm really optimistic, even though it seems dark somewhere, but good things can happen. Definitely.
That's fantastic.
I'd love to hear about like the post-COVID kind of ambition. When you're mentioning that when you started here, you were looking for partnerships in the private sector, and that hadn't really been explored before because a lot of the funding came from governments. And so I was wondering if you could take us through a little bit about, what are the budget requirements? How much is being fulfilled by governments? How much of it is being provided by private sector, and how much more is going to be needed by private sector in the future? Because I think, there's always a sense of, okay, well, what does the other partner get out of it? And I think, over time, I've seen a lot more innovation in the types of partnerships that can exist, that perhaps, like you said, fit the business needs of what they're looking to do and kind of achieve mutual objectives. So I was wondering if you could take us through a little bit of the journey about what you've seen at the beginning of those private sector partnerships and what you've seen now.
No, perfect. Excellent question. So actually what we saw is when we started our globally, not here in the region, but globally, when we started our partnerships with the private sector, it was around $50,000 15 years ago. And now we're talking around $500 million,
Wow.
like, almost $500 million. And that's mainly, and guess from where this money is coming mostly from? Individuals. So it's not from companies, it's not from foundations, it's from people, mainly in Spain, Italy, Sweden, a lot of places, Japan, who are, so they stop on the street, they give you their credit card, and they commit, and they give you every month.
Wow.
And that's why it's growing. organically because they commit, we take care of them, we make sure they stay with us. But of course, part of it is big amount of money that is coming from big companies like IKEA, for example, local companies, small amounts, foundations, big amounts. And one program I have to say that we're very proud of, Nadia, that we started a few years ago is faith-based fundraising.
Yeah.
And you know, we live in this part of the world. A lot of refugees, actually, 60% of them are in the Islamic um, uh, organization countries, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of refugees there, and what we try to do is to open the door for those who would like to give their even faith-based donation through UNHCR, right? And we did the whole program for this, and now it's we launched our Islamic philanthropy second report, and a lot of individuals are giving online. Even you have big foundations are contributing. So we're trying to diversify as much as possible, and you can imagine for an organizations like UNHCR, it can be very challenging to change mentality and shift to go more cultural, to go more, talk to religions, etc. But we're the UN. I mean, we're part of the whole world at the end of the day. So again, I'm optimistic because we see a lot of good signs coming. I just tell you a secret now, because I just was on the phone with my colleague in Egypt, and she told me there's this guy who committed a million guinea, and even from countries where you think, I love Egypt, but the economic situation is tough, but people who can give, they would give, especially now in the COVID-19. And he gave for the COVID-19 situation to support refugees. So after COVID, definitely the world, we all say that. It's a cliche now, but it's not going to be the same.
Yeah.
But I think what's going to change, I really don't know now, but I think we're just going to open our minds more and try to be more humble and celebrate the small things that people like you and me give, the same as we celebrate $1 billion. So governments give around $7 billion. This is what I want to say. So 70 million refugees, you have a budget of $7 billion. It went up from $4 billion after the Syria situation to 7, because the Syria situation itself, boom, made a big explosion in the needs. I mentioned the number from the private sector. It's still small proportionally, but it's growing, and we have a strategy to get it up to $1 billion. So we have $1 billion strategy to support refugees, of course, and we count on this more and more on individuals and the democracy of giving, if I may say that.
Houssam, I have a question that I'm not sure you have the answer to, but it's more of an assumption. So at DUCKLIFE, obviously, we're an advisory at the end of the day, and we help organizations build brands, and we believe in the power of brands. Right? We believe that brands have the responsibility nowadays, because they have a share of voice and access to audiences that sometimes even government institutions or nonprofits don't have access to. Right? So some of the biggest brands in the world today have huge fan bases and a huge reach and huge audiences, and they have a responsibility to be socially aware and to have some sort of a participant kind of attitude to the communities that they serve, right? So would you agree, or do you believe that the more the private sector kind of becomes socially aware and kind of committed to social impact programs such as the refugee crisis that we have in the Middle East, that we will start to see not just more generosity from individuals like you and I, but also the desensitization of taboo topics historically in the region, and then governments and regulation and everything kind of improving? Would you agree that the more you get private sector brands and larger brands to participate in these programs, the more generally everything kind of progresses forward, and the more it becomes kind of easier to navigate these challenges? Is that something that you're seeing?
Definitely. And at the end of the day, the brands, it's not about the grant or the donation they give by the company, but it's really about the customers, the employees, the CSR program they do, the communication they build on. So definitely, and as we saw, in the last few years, we see a lot of sports brands and fashion brands. They they, because they see the value as well in the market. That's another subject, but I just want to make a comparison. They try to brand as well their clothes, etc., with women with hijab, because they know they exist, and they want to consume, right? So for me, this is of course, it might, I don't know what the motivation at the end of the day, cannot judge that, but what I would love to see, that even those brands consider a market of 70 million, because the market of 70 million, it's a whole ecosystem, even economically. So, and once you start sending this, you take this in, the refugee issue, and you don't deal with it as only as a good cause, but as well as something that exists and something that we need to solve as much as possible from where we stand. That will change the mentality. That will change, the judgment on refugees. That in some cases, racism, in some cases, some attacks, etc. And the acceptance of refugees, that they are as well economical power to our economy, to our culture, an added value. You learn a lot. So this whole change. So definitely, it makes a very positive impact, and I hope to see this more and more commercially. To be honest, outside UNHCR, of course, but that will change the mindset, because when these big brands step in, I think definitely.
I completely agree, and I think one way we refer to refugees internally, at least, is we consider them to be wasted talent. A huge proportion of the Middle Eastern population that isn't given, the rights to participate in society, right? So, the right to work, the right to identities, the right to, the same privileges that a lot of us have. So the rights to education, the rights to access to capital, et cetera, So, we are, I've spoken about this, I think, at length also over the last few months in a topic that I call real value creation. But generally, we believe that we all have a privilege, right? We all had access to, to a safe home, shelter, to food, to education, to loving families, to opportunities, to access to capital. The fact that we can start organizations and live in places that are not, war-stricken, et cetera. Those are all privileges. And to go back and not to speak about DUCKLIFE, but the whole premise behind DUCKLIFE is, given all those privileges, let's build a business model that can sustainably fund positive impact projects, right? And that's kind of where we believe the solution at the end of the day, will land. And we're trying to prove that business model. We haven't proven it yet. We're only 1 year into the business, but we actually believe that in order to sustainably solve any problem, you need a sustainable way to make money that also incorporates positive impact. So do you think are you seeing more and more organizations have formal commitments over time, or are they one-off campaigns? Are you starting to see a change in the commercial relationship between UNHCR and brands, or not really?
Yes, and that's because, again, a friendship like this, because what happens is that when they see that Chris trusts X NGO or X UN agency or X goals, for sometimes they will say, oh, okay, so we don't have to do our due diligence very toughly, because it seems there's something good there. When they see that, MBC, we have a long relationship with them. For example, so it's really this, your due diligence as an organization is through these relationships, and we see more and more, the more we keep it, the more it's attracting other friends to come in and say, listen, it seems that you guys are doing a good job, how can we help you, right? And definitely that's the model we want to take. If I was telling Nadia, we're going hopefully for $1 billion strategy in the coming few years. And without sustainable partnerships, we cannot do that. But can I add something on what you said, Chris? Because the opportunities that refugees have. Just one thing I'm lately passionate about it, to be honest, is e-learning, because I see how much my kids here at home are, they are so privileged. Alhamdulillah, we're lucky. So they have their school. It's obviously systematically they moved from class to e-class, and then you have the refugee situation who are whether in Zatari and in Lebanon and in the displaced in Afghanistan, in Yemen, and I'm so worried on how they're going to shift from, are they going to lose the year educationally? Forget about the degree. It's just knowledge-wise, how we can help them to provide that, and this can only come from innovative partnership. That thinking out of the box, try to be there on the ground, try to put a system in place from internet to. We've done that, but not on the scale that somebody thought that everybody need to stay home. I just wanted to add this point because I think it's totally important. And after COVID, we need to be ready for such partnerships and situations.
And I think just building on the point that you made before, I mean, the idea about solving issues in a commercial way. I mean, I think what I've been really excited about in the last couple of months is looking at social enterprises that are looking to solve, really critical issues for refugee lives, but in a commercial way. So you have certain apps that are now offering, Arabic courses to people all over the world online. So instead of having to go in the informal market, they can go and directly, if they have access to the internet, go and teach Arabic. And I guess my question is, are you seeing a growth of these kinds of initiatives? Or they're not initiatives, they're businesses, they're social enterprises that are just trying to take a problem and find a way to benefit themselves and to benefit the end person, which could be the refugee. Are you seeing a growth in those types of initiatives, even if they're outside of UNHCR?
Totally. And I think now it's going to be, a boom of a lot of companies going out, and then obviously it's going to be the good ones will continue. But you know better about this. But can I mention one name?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, of course.
Lamsa, right?
Yes.
I subscribed for my kids some time ago, and now when I don't want them to play, I tell them, yeah, you can take the tablet, but you go to Lamsa, because I know they're going to learn Arabic, right? And I asked my colleague to reach out to Lamsa to make a partnership with them, because I appreciate them personally. And I think they're adding value. So they didn't come to us, and that I went to them and they were, oh yes, of course, let's do something together. So I'm not announcing a partnership here, but I think this kind of, but seriously, nothing that we're discussing. But you see that exactly, Nadia, what you said. I mean, if there is a business solution and somebody can add value, or both sides can add value, you want to make it happen. I would like to see a story on such app about refugees, positive one. So our kids from now know, there are kids who are not fortunate, and they'll grow and they don't know where they're going to be at the end of the day. And they might be our best friends, and it's okay, So this kind of mentality.
Reducing the stigma. Yeah.
Yes. Totally.
So Houssam, it's been about 45 minutes. We've spoken about a whole array of things. I thank you so much for your time. I'm super interested on having you back on the show, probably post-COVID, whenever that is, just to get an update of the circumstances of the situation on the ground. I just want to thank you again for all the time, all the insights you've shared, and the friendship and partnership that we've had for over 5 years. We really, really appreciate you. So thank you very much. If there's anything you'd like to say to close, please go ahead. But we look forward to having you again soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nadia. Thank you, Chris. And stay safe, and we'll definitely see you soon, whether here or another platform, and keep up the good work.
I'm not changing again.
Likewise.
I'm not going anywhere else. This is our company. Thanks, Houssam. Take care.
Thanks, Houssam.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.